Welcome to Critical Issues, Alternative Views. I'm Ron Kramer, Professor of Sociology at Western Michigan University, and I serve as the host of the program. With me today are our two regular viewmeisters. On my right is Denise Keele. Denise is a professor in the Political Science Department. She also has an appointment at the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, and she serves as the chair of the WMU Climate Change Working Group. On my left is Don Cooney. Don is a professor over in the School of Social Work at Western Michigan University, and he serves as a Kalamazoo City Commissioner. Well, it's been a month since we have been able to do a program, and the last time that we met, the government was shut down. It was actually the fairly early stages of the shutdown, but it lasted quite a bit longer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Finally, the shutdown ended, and as of yesterday, we now actually have a budget deal in place. Conference committee came up with a plan. It does not include a lot of money for a wall, or any money for a wall. There's a little bit of money for some additional fencing. So apparently, Trump got nothing that he wanted out of the compromise. He's been backed into a corner, I think. Can't afford to have another government shutdown.
Right.
It was bad for the Republicans. It was bad for Trump. And so he reluctantly is going to sign this. But then today, what did he do, Denise?
So just this morning, right before this taping, there was a press conference in the Rose Garden where it took him a very long time to get to the issue, in my humble opinion. Many statements about what we were doing with China and Korea and all sorts of other wonderful, amazing things, to then announce that he'll be issuing and signing an executive order for the Emergency Act in order to get almost $8 billion, with a B, folks, dollars, to move forward with the wall, which is his campaign promise, of course, and is ultimately what caused the original shutdown. So a sidestep of Congress, a misappropriation of Article 1 of the Constitution. The legislature is supposed to be able to spend the money. In the questions this morning, it was very interesting. Some folks pushed and said, well, don't you know, folks are going to challenge you on this. Oh, we win in court. No one talks about how we win in court. And he recognizes that this is going to happen, but I think there was a real explicit recognition that he has to do this. Right? Yeah.
So it's his way out.
His way out.
I mean, and then he can say, even if he loses in court, which we hope he does,
That's right.
that I did everything I could.
That's right.
This wouldn't let me do it.
That's exactly right.
Because the American people oppose the wall.
Right.
Right, two-thirds.
The evidence is clear.
That's
the American people do not want to have this wall. They think it's unnecessary and will be ineffective, and that's what all the experts say. So there's tremendous opposition to the wall. But the Trump base, this is an absolute demand of theirs. And of course, what we have now is government by Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh assaults on Trump, right?
Yeah.
Oh my
If they criticize Trump, then he has to do what they tell him to do.
Yeah, he was explicitly asked that question. Trump's relationship with the press has been uneven at best, right? And he was specifically asked, how do you take in the opinions of the Rush Limbaughs, the Sean Hannitys, the Ann Coulters? He said, I know they're great people. I don't even know Ann Coulter. People keep saying that, I do her bidding. I don't even know her, I'm not sure I would like her if we met. All these very strange quotes. So really trying to distance himself from that particular. And another reporter, I don't know if NBC will be allowed back to the press room after this, asked, essentially, well, what about, how do you deal with the idea of the conflicting reports from your own agencies about what you state is the problem, that it's crime and drugs and violence, and that's not coming from the border, that's not actually true. And he went back to his original line of, no, you're not correct. See, it was a CNN guy, you're fake news. And absolutely, I have my sources. And the guy pushed him a little bit, well, can you share those sources with us? Right?
Yeah.
Well, where are you getting that? And so totally it's still the line of, this is saving the country from rapists, murderers, drugs. bad people. It's not the people, the good people that do this. All of those sort of similar arguments, and highlighted and brought, I forget their exact name, there's a group of folks who have made an organization, who have loved ones who've been, unfortunately, succumbed to violence from illegal immigrants, right? So there is, of course, bad things happen, right? So they were there. He highlighted several of their stories to sort of continue to prove this case in his true believers' minds of this alternate reality that much like climate change, which we'll get to you later, just does not exist. Neither the facts nor the law are on your side. And I heard Joe Kennedy say, when neither the facts or the law are on your side, then the only thing you have left is to be loud. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And an emergency declaration is pretty loud.
Right.
Because clearly there's no emergency.
Right.
No.
There's no one with who has any empirical evidence to support it, to say that this is an emergency.
That's right.
In fact, immigration or illegal crossings
down.
are down, right? And
Fake
of
news.
course, he's completely wrong about the amount of crime committed by
Correct.
immigrants. I mean, the top criminologists in the world have published in the top journals in the field of criminology that that's not true.
That's right.
Immigrants, legal or illegal, commit far less crime than native-born Americans.
That's
so,
right.
I mean, everything that he says
Yes.
is wrong.
Yes.
It's just not true.
That's exactly right.
And this is the most infuriating thing about this administration.
Right.
They just
Right.
keep saying things that are not true. They just lie and lie and lie and lie and lie.
Yep.
And you try to point out the facts to them, and he just is completely dismisses.
He can dismiss it
So
through conspiracy
how do you
theory.
deal with a person who's in a completely different universe, has a completely alternative reality? But he's
Exactly.
the most powerful person in the country, and he's making policy based
right.
on fantasy. This is fantasy land.
right.
He's making policy based on fantasies, but fantasies that appeal to his core base.
And the press should start calling them lies. They should
Yes.
start, instead of just reporting this is what he says,
That's right.
and this, then the next line is, but this is totally untrue
That's right.
because of this and that. I think that has to happen more. But the other disturbing thing to me is how his followers stick to him.
Oh, yeah.
And no matter what he says, they just grab it up. And the violence against the press,
That's right.
the threatened violence, is very, very disturbing. Because
right.
how can you have a democracy if you can't get to the truth? You just can't have it. So that part of it's really disturbing too.
It is.
But his support, while it's dropped some, still there's a solid,
right.
high percentage of people that are following him, and that's really troubling.
Ruled by fear, right? As we've talked about, and this idea of I'm losing advantage. I don't like the changes that are happening in this world, and I would like to stop those, right? And it was interesting to me to think about those arguments being presented by our president today, that this is where crime comes from, and this is the problem. I just want to remind everybody, this is also the day, it's February 15th day, it's the day after the Parkland massacre.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And we've lost another thousands.
1,200.
Exactly.
1,200 youth since that
To gun
a year
violence.
ago.
So if you really want to talk about, right, what might be the sources of crime, and you know this better than any of us, Ron, right? It's white Americans, not illegal immigrants, right? And yet that storyline doesn't help build the fear-mongering base that keeps you powerful, right? Doesn't appeal.
So he's taken this executive action, this emergency declaration under the National Emergency Act. Now that act does allow for the Congress to object.
That's right.
The Congress can object, and I'm pretty sure that the House of Representatives will do this. I'm sure Nancy Pelosi will put this to a vote fairly soon, and that it will be voted against, and you just need a majority vote there.
Right.
So it will be rejected by the House. The Senate must then vote on
That's
it.
right.
Mitch
Yeah.
McConnell can't punt on
That's
this
right.
one and hide it away and not bring it to the floor. The law requires him to bring this to a vote.
Right.
He'll bring it to a vote in the Senate, and it will also be rejected by the Senate. There will be enough Republican senators who will vote against this.
Let's hope so.
They've spoken out.
They
I mean,
have
Susan
spoken out.
Collins and
Rubio has been very
Rubio.
strong
Yeah,
on this.
right.
So.
Right.
And I really do think, because they don't need too many. I mean, they only
That's
need to pull
right.
away 2 or 3, right?
That's right.
And I think it will get rejected in the Senate. Now, the problem is that another Supreme Court decision says that there can't be a legislative veto, right?
Right.
So so then the president will have the opportunity to veto it, and of course he will.
Right.
And there's not enough support in the Senate, maybe even in the House, to override a veto.
Right.
So that is going to happen. That will play out, but ultimately that will lose. Now, the only thing that really can do is to show how divided the Republicans really are on this issue.
Right.
If enough Republican senators follow their conscience, which is always a question,
Yes.
then
Especially
that might be the only thing that could come out of that. So what's going to happen then is that there will be a number of lawsuits that will
That's
be
right.
filed. And so it will be challenged that this is not really a national emergency, that
Right.
this is basically an unconstitutional appropriation of money that's already been appropriated by Congress
That's
for other
right.
purposes, and now the president's trying to unconstitutionally, according to Article 1 of the Constitution, take
That's
that
right.
money away and use it for another purpose. And I'm pretty certain that an injunction will be issued,
Yeah.
that this will be stopped. And then we're in the courts for a long period of time.
That's right.
And so who knows what the final outcome of that will be.
That's right.
I think ultimately Trump loses. I think ultimately
Right.
this is not going to stand. But it's going to be a while. And of course what it does, Don, as you pointed out,
Right.
it throws red meat to his base.
That's
and
right. As long as he can say that they're trying something, and then it's back to, it's back to the liberal Ninth Circuit, is, activist judges. It's
Yeah,
all the
right.
same rhetoric that undermines every institution. Right, free press, the courts, these things do matter, right? What Congress's responsibilities are. And it just undermines all of those is what he'll continue to do. The larger question, I think, Ron, is what you're getting at, this idea of, if there is a fracture in the Republican Party, this is an electoral decision, right? This is, to put both your points together, why keep doing this? Because this is the base that they are hoping is going to turn out for Trump, right, for 2020, and for whatever Republicans might stick with him in whatever districts that makes sense. But I think there's a real argument about whether this is going to help the Republicans electorally or not, because there are enough folks saying, this is just like too much.
This is crazy.
CBS News last night says 66% of the country opposes
Right.
the declaration. So it might cost them, and that's the hope.
That's right.
That whether it's conscience or nothing, I'm not counting on that. But I am counting on them that maybe if there's enough people that say this is an absurdity,
Right.
and they're even scared of the precedent,
Yes.
that there might be enough to override the veto. Now, that would be a long shot. That
Yeah,
would
I
be a
think that's a
very
long
long
shot.
shot.
Right.
But
I do think that what we saw in the final budget deal,
Yep.
the compromise that was arrived at, I mean, basically there's no money for a wall.
No.
No.
So that's completely not there. And it got quite a few Republican votes in the Senate, enough to override a veto. I
That's
mean,
right.
Trump could have vetoed this thing yesterday and it still would have passed, right?
That's
'Cause
right.
There's
Yeah.
enough. There's
Right.
probably enough votes in both houses
Right.
to override the veto. So what that shows, I think, is that a number of Republican senators have now made the calculation
Right.
that on this issue, it hurts me more politically to go with the president than to go against the president.
right.
Now, if enough Republican senators start to make that calculation,
Right.
then we're likely to see some changes, right? And we've talked on a number of times on this program that the only way to really stop the Trump agenda is if enough Republicans finally say no. We can't go along with this. And again, they're not going to say that based on
No,
conscience.
no.
Electability.
Or values, but
Yeah.
it's electability. What
Right.
it comes down to, is this going to hurt my chances electorally? And is it going to hurt the party's chances? And
That's right.
already they're suffering from the debacle of the 2018 election where they lost the House. Now, the Senate was set up to be favorable to Republicans last
Right.
time. Next time, 2020, it's not.
It's not.
The Republicans could lose the Senate really easily in 2020.
Yeah.
In fact, I
Right.
think it's almost I don't know, come out on the limb and predict it, but I think it's pretty much a sure thing unless
think it's very
something
likely.
dramatically changes,
Yeah.
that the Republicans are going to lose the Senate
Right.
also. And so I think some of these Republican senators who want to survive another blue wave, another onslaught that's probably coming in 2020, are going to have to depart from this president. And they did on this budget deal.
Right.
Will they do it on the National Emergency Act?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. But how many other things that are coming up down the road will they make that calculation? That's going to be the most interesting political question, I think, in the next 2 years.
Exactly. Yeah. The more he gets isolated,
Right.
the better chance we got, and that's the game. And I think it's important that people speak out.
Yes.
Not just the legislators, but people around the country really have to say, this is wrong. We're not going for this one. This has got to stop. Yeah.
Well, we know that he can't give in, though, right?
He can't.
So,
Politically, he's in a corner.
Yeah, and one of the other things that sort of struck me in his speech this morning was essentially there were some veiled threats in there. Like, there are certain people who have blocked this, who haven't done what they needed to do. I assume he's talking about Speaker Paul Ryan, and who knows who he's talking about? Because I think he's finally learning about divided government. you had your chance for 2 years to do something if these Republicans really were with you.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
But in his speech this morning, he 2 or 3 times said there are people to blame, and I'm not. They know who they are. I'm not going to let it go. So I almost want, if we're going to see some more Donald Trump attack ads against Republicans who don't continue to support this, it'll make it a very interesting, divisive Republican race, because that's what he needs to run on to get reelected.
Yeah.
But it's not what many of these Republicans, and they're in a very slim win position, as you know, just by the numbers anyways. So, boy, hang on to your seats, I guess.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what he's going to do.
So is he talking about taking the money from the Pentagon? Does that mean that the Pentagon doesn't need all the money they got? We can
a
just
lot
take
of it
away?
is, exactly, and which is also a very interesting precedent for a Republican president, I thought, right?
Yeah,
But
right.
if your claim is that this is a massive, basically an armed sort of insurgence into our country, an invasion was the word that he used, then I think that's legally how he's going to try to link these things to taking that money from that particular source. Well, you've already sort of approved that because that's the war budget, and this is where we're at war.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real question about whether he can take Pentagon money and
Correct.
use it for a domestic project like this.
Correct.
Yes.
There's some real serious legal questions about that.
Yes.
And I heard that he was also thinking about taking some money from disaster relief
That's right.
for
Yes.
California and Puerto
Puerto Rico,
right?
right.
Yeah.
So,
Who's this new attorney general? Boy, he's got some interesting arguments to make.
William Barr just
Yeah,
recently
but Barr's a
approved
strong
Yeah, we just-
executive
yeah.
power guy,
That's
right?
right.
I mean, that's what's scary about him.
That's right.
Yeah.
One of the other objections that Republicans, some of the Republican senators have had to the emergency declaration is that, well, and Nancy Pelosi made this explicit yesterday, she was a real, not even a veiled threat from her.
Right.
All right, if you guys can play this game, we can play this game
That's
also.
right.
And so if there's a different president in there,
Right.
a Democratic president,
Right.
if you can use emergency powers, then so can a Democratic
right.
president on different issues. Gun violence and climate
Climate,
change
yep.
come right to the top of those lists. And
Right.
those are true national emergencies.
Exactly.
I mean, here's where a president could make the case that this is a national emergency. Trump
Right.
has no case whatsoever
No.
about the border. There's an extremely strong empirical case for gun violence and for climate change.
That's
And
right.
so,
That's why I brought up the
Absolutely.
Parkland shooting. Like, that's what we see every day. That's what's actually happening in this
Yeah,
country.
right.
But yeah, even, this is why a guy like Rubio is against it, right? And so it really is about our democracy and our Constitution and the separation of powers
Yeah.
here. Because that's exactly been his quote. Well, I just don't want the executive to be able to run ramshackle over the Constitution, which used to be a Republican value, I thought.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
And you mentioned two real emergencies. I think a third emergency is that this nation ranks at the top of industrialized countries in child poverty. I mean, isn't
That's
that an
right.
emergency? Gee whiz. What else? I mean, that's real.
That's right.
And that's something we could really do something about.
That's right.
But no, we're doing this silly stuff.
Well, let's combine those things.
Yeah.
Because, in fact, climate change is a real national emergency. Economic inequality and poverty is a
Yeah.
real emergency. And so we have a new proposal to deal with
Yes.
these problems. So the Green New Deal has been proposed. And so it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC,
Yes.
a new representative from New York, and Senator Ed Markey
Yeah,
from Massachusetts
Right.
have introduced a landmark resolution,
Yes.
which has been called the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
It was introduced on February 7th. Denise, what is the Green New Deal? Can
Sure.
you take us through what this this resolution deals with.
Sure, I will try. So yeah, it's a non-binding resolution, right, is the first thing to understand about this. This
Right.
isn't a bill with like specifics and allocations. This is a resolution. So it really is a, where do you sit? Where do you stand on this issue? Up, down, support or not sort of vote, right? And the first whole part of it really is the recognition of climate change, the recognition of the U.S.'s role in climate change, and a total move from fossil fuels to green energy and technology. Now then what this does, the Green New Deal, right? We all know about the New Deal and
Sure.
FDR and those times.
Yeah.
And really the way maybe to think about is we've often discussed politics, right? From 1932 to 1980, we operated under sort of New Deal liberalism, right? And Reagan, that's been over since 1980,
Right.
and we've been operating a
Right.
conservative agenda. So what this does is not only bring in the climate change aspect, but do the thing that many of us have been asking for and link. These crises are interrelated and they are linked together. So the transition to solve the climate crisis, along with that, can and should be an economic stimulus. And in solving the climate crisis, we can also deal with income insecurity, college, healthcare, that these are related things. Jobs, justice, and climate is the three big prongs of the Green New Deal, right? So, and what a great meme to take over the New Deal and sort of take that back and add it. Yeah, it's an economic stimulus bill, really, at its heart, but it's a green one, right? All the jobs and all the momentum. We need to be moving to this sort of technology. So that's sort of the basics. I know, Don has had it printed with him and got the report. I mean, it's really based on science. I think the other big thing, we're going to believe
Very much
science
so.
here.
Yeah.
We're going to take the last U.S.-owned government agency report, and the goals in there are even a little bit more forward than that, right? The 2030, half of the emissions cut by 2030, zero emissions by 2050. This moves that up to 2030. It's aspirational,
Very much
right?
so. Yes.
Like Paris is.
I think one of the things that's interesting, David Brooks wrote a column this week critiquing it,
Yes.
saying too much government.
Yes.
Well, there have been times in our history when it was real clear that the only ones who could solve the problem were the federal government.
That's right.
And one was the Great Depression,
Right.
and one was the Second World War.
Yep.
And this is a third,
Yep.
because these emergencies, the social emergency and the climate emergency are linked so well, as you said.
Yeah.
And the only one who could really lead this thing is the federal government, and that makes that clear in here.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think they're careful in here of
Yeah.
saying localities have to be involved in how this is carried out.
Yeah, good
And
point.
especially the people, what they call on the frontier, those people that are most experiencing it. So, I mean, I think it's a breath of fresh air. It's
Yes.
wonderful to see this out there and under discussion.
So Mitch McConnell has threatened. I'm not sure where this actually stands. I tried to find out, and there's so much, many different reportings about him thinking that Mitch McConnell thinks he's going to force the Senate vote on this, so it will immediately get struck down. Is his hope? I don't know if he's going to still call that vote after today. There was some back and forth on that.
Well, yeah, I think he also wants to get everybody on record, right?
Yes.
Because, where do you stand on this?
That's right.
And he thinks that it's a political loser for
He
the
does.
Democrats. I think
Yep.
he might be quite wrong on that.
Yep.
Yes.
But he
Yes.
wants to definitely get it out there to get these
Yes.
Democratic senators on the record as
That's
supporting
right.
the Green New Deal, which he thinks is political poison for them.
That's right.
And he probably can, if he holds his Republican ranks, defeat it.
Right.
Maybe that's the end of it at that point. He thinks it's going to
Right.
go away at that point. But
Yeah. But no, that's exactly right. Back to this, electoral politics question, right? One of the critiques is
Right.
that just as the wall is to Trump and Republican fractures, that the Green New Deal, is the fracturing, or could be the fracturing element within the Democrats, right? And whether or not you support this and this bold, sort of more progressive, all-encompassing, at least agenda, right?
Yeah.
There's no specific bill here again, right? It's
Right,
just,
right.
do you believe this? or not? Like, let's
Yeah.
get on the record saying that, right? And I think most of, every presidential candidate is going to be, every Democratic presidential candidate, right? I don't know what number we're up to at this point on the show, is being
60
asked,
or 70
forced,
now,
right? To say, do you support
Yeah.
this or not? And they're all,
So far.
it is this fracture, though, of are we going to go all in on the Dem side for this kind of future? Or, there are still, right, Manchin, Pelosi, there are folks who are like, I don't know, it seems like kind of a dream, and I
Yeah.
can't probably
Manchin.
win on that in my district.
Right,
Right,
he
right.
would mention.
Manchin, right, has already come out saying, I can't,
Well, he's
I
got
can't
this
do
coal
this.
there, and that's what they build that whole thing around in West Virginia, and he's stuck
That's
there.
right.
But are the Democrats, I think it would be really smart for the Democrats to have public hearings on this as a
good
way of educating the country and talking about these specific things. I mean, that's one thing the Republicans haven't done at all, is hold public hearings
Right.
and bring in experts, bring in people
Yeah.
to talk about this so that people can begin to think about it nationwide. And I think that builds a constituency for it. That's what
Yeah.
I would like to see happen.
Oh, we should write that to them right now. That's a great idea. Well, and then if folks aren't familiar with a youth climate activist group called Sunrise.
Oh, right. They're right here.
We have a chapter here in Kalamazoo, and they've organized a lot of very sophisticated and compelling action around this Green New Deal. They hosted a live, Facebook where Naomi Klein sat in with these young people to talk
Wow.
about their support for the Green New Deal, and they are out there right now really pushing every member of Congress to, again, make this, where do you stand on this issue? And we all are going to vote, and we're going to be the largest voting bloc in about 5 years. They're going to be 40% of the voting bloc
Wow.
in the next 6 years. So they would like to know where you stand on this issue and where I think that's a lot of political leverage and power that they're able to bring. And they also want Mitch McConnell. They say, good, call the vote. Let's see. 'Cause
Right.
we're watching. Is
Put
their
it on the
message,
record. Put
right?
it on the record.
That's right. So
Taking notes.
I know, right?
We're making a record.
When we were doing the anti-apartheid work,
Yeah.
what our goal was and what we've actually achieved was to have an anti-apartheid organization in every congressional district in the country. So there was in every congressional district a group of people who were organizing and building that organization and getting more people involved in it. I think that's what has to happen on this kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I see Sunrise trying to
Yes,
do. And
exactly.
what a powerful statement from the folks who are going to experience the worst of something like climate change,
That's right.
who don't have jobs and are in debt and all, right?
Yeah.
Their lives are very different. And it is I think we're starting to see another big shift, right? Back to some sort of need for big government, right? Christian Parente, as we know, right?
So this is an important point about the Green New Deal, is that it is going to do exactly that, Denise.
Yep.
If we can get the public education component going, it's going to raise a lot of questions about
Yep.
the larger political ideology
That's right.
in this country
Right.
and the
Yes.
role of government.
That's right.
So David Brooks attacks it as, okay, more big government, right? So no one ever talks about the fact that we have too much corporate power, right?
Exactly.
Very good
Noam
point.
Chomsky always talks
That's
about
right.
corporate tyranny.
That's right.
All these people on the right are afraid of
Yeah.
government tyranny. No, what they're afraid of is that it's going to restrict the corporate tyranny that currently rules us, right?
That's right.
And so this corporate power
Yep.
is really what they want to
Yeah.
sustain, right? This is a form of tyranny. This is a form of inequality.
That's right.
And the reason they want to limit the role of government is because they want the corporation
Yeah.
to continue to rule. Now, they're corporate Democrats as well, right?
Correct.
And so that's the problem that the Democratic Party is going to have.
That's right.
AOC and Bernie Sanders are out there, and they're basically calling for an end to this corporate coziness, and Nancy Pelosi and other elements of the party still want to be good corporate Democrats.
That's right.
And get campaign contributions and
Yeah.
keep peace and get reelected in their districts, right? So this is going to raise an ideological issue for the Democratic Party to have to deal with.
Yes, exactly.
And it's so interesting the way that the Republicans who oppose this and some of the conservative pundits who oppose this immediately raise the specter of socialism.
Yes.
As if, and again, their notion of what socialism
Oh, yeah.
is so distorted.
Yeah.
I mean, it bears no relationship to what people are actually talking about,
That's
right?
right.
Because nobody makes the distinction. Nobody on the right makes any kind of distinction between the Soviet Union, an authoritarian,
Right.
top-down government
Right.
ownership and control of the economy, and the real issue of democratic socialism,
Yes. That's
right.
or economic democracy or
Yeah.
Right.
participatory economics, and that's really what we're talking about here,
That's
right?
right.
Exactly.
That people, that consumers and the public and those who have a stake in this should be allowed to participate in the democratic process and make important economic decisions. That
That's
it
right.
shouldn't just be the top dogs in the corporate
That's right.
world who make the top dogs in the economic world who make all the decisions in a
Right.
top-down fashion, right? So this is a real infusion of democratic processes into economic thinking. And they also confuse socialism with what has come to be known as social democracy. So if we look to the Scandinavian countries, for
Right.
example, those are not socialist countries,
No.
No.
right?
No.
They do not have socialism.
No.
Those are still capitalist societies,
That's
right?
right.
Their economies are still, there's still private ownership of the means of production in
That's
those
right.
societies.
That's right.
What they have, however, that's dramatically different than what we have, they have a very strong role for government to play,
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a very strong role for government to play to regulate and keep in check the worst
Right.
excesses of the capitalists
That's right.
and the corporations. They have a very strong social safety net for their people. And the lives of the people in those countries are very much better. I mean, on every
Yeah.
measure
Yes.
of social well-being, they come out way, way, way ahead of us
Right.
in
That's
terms
right.
of healthcare and education
right.
and, you name it,
Right.
life satisfaction. They're
Right.
way ahead of us.
Security, yeah. I
And
mean,
that the reason they are so much ahead of us in all those areas is because of the very strong role that government plays in their society. But
That's
those
right.
are still capitalist societies. So that's what the Republicans and what the conservative pundits want to avoid is any discussion of the important role that a social democracy
That's
can
right.
play. And so immediately they have to smear it and label it as Soviet-style authoritarian
Exactly.
socialism. And they've been very successful at doing that
Absolutely.
for a long period of time. And that's what they're trying to do immediately with
That's
the Green
right.
New Deal, is to smear it as if it's somehow Soviet-style
That's right.
communism. And it's, of course, is far, far, far from that. It's more in line with, again, these social democratic institutions that we see in Scandinavia.
Exactly right. And I think it's really only that same small, 36 to 39% that are Trump supporters, right, that are still falling for this old meme of socialism, right? That I
Yeah.
can raise this word and this specter and dog whistle everybody into a certain line of behavior. I think this millennial generation, right, recognizes the thing that you're talking about, Ron, and that corporate power. Who's been getting all the benefits of that?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Very, very few. And this wealth and income inequality issue is, I think, driving the idea that, well, that's not so terrible. We might want government check on corporations. Who would you rather have, right?
Yeah.
Sort of over your life. But it is, the folks on the House floor the other day, the Republicans were saying, well, this means that you won't be able to, for example, choose and eat ice cream anymore. It was one particular thing that they, picked up. And that's this, right, this how authoritative your government's going to let you not have ice cream is one. Right? It's just right, because it's so absurd because
Oh
it's
my
just
God.
not the
Well,
kind
one
of
said
thing.
you won't be able to fly.
And
you
on
won't be
the
able to
fly.
fly. You won't be able to own cows.
I know. It's like that's not even what's going on. And I think that those arguments are falling flat on more ears than ever.
Because
I
they're
think so.
absurd. Those are absurd arguments. Those are, not true. Again, we're back to things that are
Exactly.
not true. They're not in the bill. Those aren't true. That's not the
right.
intent. And yet those are here we're back to
Right.
fear-mongering tactics, right?
That's right.
You lie and lie and lie and smear and smear and smear in an effort to defeat
That's right.
legislation that's threatening to your economic and political interests. And
That's
that's
right.
what the Republicans are doing there.
Right.
So I wonder how Amazon's move out of New York plays into this, because people were saying,
Yeah.
hey, you guys are giving everything to him. You're putting in a heliport for Bezos in there. And
The
we're
richest
paying
man in
for
the
that.
world.
Richest man in the world. We're
Yeah.
paying for that. We got problems here.
Yeah.
And then they put up enough stink, and
Right.
Amazon pulls out of that.
That's
I mean,
right.
I think that's great in terms of raising the consciousness
right.
about what these guys, what
Yeah.
it means to just placate these guys all
right.
the time.
That's right.
I think that's an interesting link there.
Yeah, so again, it comes back to the fact that when we talk about the proper role of government, okay, And certainly one can raise concerns about the role of government infringing on people's freedoms and
Right.
you know, due process of law and equal protection of the law. We can talk about all those things, but nobody ever talks about the powerful role of corporations.
That's right.
You know,
Right.
we don't talk about the Amazons and the fossil fuel companies, and
Right.
and again, the corporate tyranny, the corporate power, the corporate share of the wealth of our nation.
That's right.
Which leads to a new Gilded Age. That's what we have. We have a new Gilded Age
Right.
of massive structural economic
Right.
inequality,
Right.
and people are suffering. Many people suffer from that structural inequality. And so any effort to try to address or redress that structural economic inequality to reduce corporate power is met by these howls of
Right.
socialism
Right,
and
exactly.
authoritarianism.
Loss
Yeah.
of freedom. Well, whose freedom?
Whose freedom? The
Right.
freedom of corporations to do whatever the heck they want
That's
to.
exactly right. So, and all, just to be fair, right there, I agree with you. There is also an argument to be made for liberty and freedom, and
Of
you know,
course.
and there are other ways within the big government specter to solve this problem. And right now, also, we have a bill introduced for energy innovation and carbon dividend, right? That would be a tax on the source of fossil fuels, right? That then that money doesn't go back to the big, bad, terrible government to waste inefficiently, right, and mess you up. It goes back to individual people, right? Which is, so there's got a lot of Republican and libertarian support, right, on this idea of there's things in the middle here that we could strive for that are being presented right now in order to get to the aspirational goals of a Green New Deal.
Yeah, I was really impressed how in the Green New Deal proposal, they explicitly address the economic inequality, the racism, and the sexism,
Yep.
and the implications of that for our society.
Yes.
Very powerful, yeah, very good.
Yeah, I like some of the you know, language in there of a duty to repair.
That's right.
And again, we have a social system, a social structure, a social fabric that has been torn by these, and there is a duty to repair. We need a rapid
right.
and just transition.
Right.
We do need to, you know, eliminate poverty, create good jobs, close racial and gender wealth gaps. I mean, those are all things that are part of the Green New Deal. It's not just about climate, although
That's right.
climate is a central feature of it,
That's
right?
right.
And you know, we do have to respond to the climate crisis, and this is you know, a very important step, right?
The link, as you pointed out, Denise,
Yep.
the link between the economy, the climate, the inequality is so strong in your
Right.
work, and yeah, really.
The holistic vision.
That's right.
That's important, the holistic vision.
That's right.
And that's been missing, I think,
Yes.
from liberal politics, right? There
Absolutely.
has been no holistic vision.
That's right.
And unless you present a vision of how this country could be more just and
Yes.
how it could be better for people's day-to-day
Right.
lives to do these things, then they're not going to do it, right?
No.
And this is where I think corporate Democrats always fall short.
Yep.
Because there's no inspiring vision.
No.
There's no, I mean, you're just kind of nibbling around the
exactly.
edges, and you're not advancing a vision that's going
Right.
to really bring people to rally to your cause.
Exactly.
You're not presenting a vision, an inspiring vision that's going to these young people,
Exactly.
that's going to motivate them to come out and vote and work
That's right.
and do the kinds of things that.
Well, this provides a big tent for the Democratic Party, right? Because all of those different causes and groups now can have a unifying cause, right? Well,
Right.
you're you know, against racism and sexism and income inequality and climate. All those things can now be related to one movement and one show of support. And I think that's going to be a really powerful social movement way to bring together lots of different groups who are working on disparate issues,
Yes.
right? Much more powerful to link them together and argue them as a case moving forward to a better.
Yeah, and I was very impressed about how the language in here is so reminiscent of the economic New Deal that
Oh,
Roosevelt
yes.
talked about and the Universal Declaration of Human
That's
Rights.
right.
And I really think that that's where the Democrats have to start talking about.
Yep.
This is what we should be about, and this is what we aim to achieve. I think that's the message that we haven't heard.
That's right.
Anything else about the Green New Deal that we need to talk about right now? I mean, I
don't-
think this is going to be an ongoing
think, yeah, we'll see what
discussion,
happens.
And there's a lot more we could pull out of this, I think. But we also wanted to focus on a state issue that's related.
Yeah.
And that is that our new governor, Governor Whitmer, has proposed or issued an executive order which reorganized some departments within the state government.
Right.
She has created a new Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. You said it's Eagle, right?
Eagle. The
Oh.
Eagle has landed. Is the
So this new department is meant to address a number of issues. Climate change
Right.
is certainly one of them. Of course, the Flint water crisis and other environmental catastrophes within the state, and moving us toward clean energy. And so there's a lot of things going on here. Now, one of the components of this new department is going to be a new Office of Climate and Energy. And I think that's very important, and this is where the climate change issue obviously comes
Right,
in.
right.
The governor also has signed us up for the U.S. Climate Alliance.
That's right.
Which is an alliance of governors around the country to
Right.
support and keep working on the Paris Agreement, even if Trump does succeed eventually in taking us out of the Paris Agreement.
Right.
These governors have pledged to continue to support the goals of
Right.
Paris. So now our governor has joined with that alliance, as did the new governor of Wisconsin last week as well. So these are things. Now, Denise, what happened though? What happened to the governor's executive order?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, right, so, and this is an interesting parallel to the federal situation. Here we have a governor at the state level moving forward with exactly these kinds of things that we're just talking about the role of government is purposeful for. And of course, we also have a legislature that gets to weigh in on such matters. And because that legislature is Republican controlled, and the votes have been exactly along party lines in the Senate, 22-16, and in the House, 58-52, which are the exact party numbers, to decry this order illegal.
To reject it.
To reject it.
Reject it.
Right.
Exactly. So, which hasn't happened, and I wish I knew what bill, since the 60s, apparently, that an
Wow.
executive order in Michigan by a governor who, again, rightly so, should be able to control their agencies. One of the basic sort of structural powers is once those agencies are created and given their mandate by a legislature, they live under the executive and they sort of get to direct their sort of day-to-day and their organization, right? Nothing like this has happened since the 60s
Wow.
to say, no, we're going to reject your vision for your agencies, Governor Whitmore, right? For example, Snyder reorganized the agencies, added to our Department of Environmental Quality, which has a mandate to protect the environment, a whole clause about a vibrant economy. Right? If there ever was a statutory reason to say, no, that's probably not what they do, right? So I think it's going to be hard-pressed to see some validity of this and what Whitmore's next step may be. And the hang-up, it appears to me, Ron, is exactly what we were talking about before, this idea of industry versus citizen voices. A bill that got passed in Michigan last year was to have industry panels to give oversight.
Advisory panel.
Wow.
Yep,
to
to-
give oversight.
To our Department of Environmental Quality, and both in their permit stage and in their rulemaking stage. So, right, so industries would be able to weigh in. It's like, it was an 11-member commission, but 7 or 8 of those seats were given to various industry folks. Fox in the Hen House was the way that it was dubbed. And
Polluter panels.
Polluter panels.
That's what they are. They're
You know,
polluter
of course.
panels.
So any potentially even adverse decision that are already, troubled DEQ. I mean, Flint happened under this DEQ's watch, right?
Right.
This is already a troubled agency that is, many would argue, beholden to agency anyways. You know, nonetheless, if they were ever able to make a decision that was for the environment or the people of Michigan, here's this industry sort of oversight panel that could then reject that. And those bills passed the legislature last year, and many argued it was because they foresaw the Democratic blue wave writing on the wall and wanted to put some other shackles around the agencies in Michigan because the governor would come in and do these things. So part of the package in this executive order was to do the reorganizations that you talked about, but also to say, and no more of these industry panels.
Get rid of these.
My agencies constitutionally have a right under me to fulfill the statutes.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the compromise will be, we keep these silly industry panels, but still maybe get to do some of the reorganization, but there still would be this sort of shackle around you, right? Because every decision would go through this industry panel. I think that's part of the real fight here, which is exactly at the federal level of, do you want businesses and industries ruling are
regulating themselves.
right? Because the other things that are in Whitmer's executive order are, in my mind, all about direct democracy and citizen voices. There are drinking water advocates, roles for folks like that inside the agencies, an environmental justice advocate, right? Being able to have a whistleblower clause. There are numerous things like this within her executive orders, too, that are trying to give more power to the average citizen or an internal agency person to say, hey, something's not going right. And that's the legacy of Flint, right? So,
Yeah.
so that there's this contrast of, well, who do we really want to be in control? And shutting down the Democratic governor's executive order, well, what do you expect here, I guess? But
So let's be clear, what the Republican Party does is protect corporations.
Correct.
They dance to the tune of the State Chamber of Commerce, right?
That's right.
So they're corporate lackeys.
Right.
That's what they are, they're corporate lackeys.
Yeah.
They're not about protecting Michigan citizens, they're about protecting the profits of
Right.
corporations. So this allows corporations to kill regulations
Yes.
that they don't want and they don't like.
Yes.
And that puts at risk Michigan citizens,
That's right.
like the people of
Very
Flint were
much.
put
That's
at risk.
correct.
Yeah.
So this does not protect citizens, this protects corporations.
Right.
That's why they set up these advisory panels. That's why we call them polluter panels.
that's right. Mm.
The polluters are now in control of the regulations that are supposed to deal with their pollution.
That's right.
And of course, they're going to kill them.
That's
They're
right.
going to kill them off or kill off the worst aspects of
Yep.
them. And so that reveals the Republicans to be corporate lackeys. That's who they're serving.
That's right.
They're serving the interests of corporations and business and not the interest of average
Right.
Michigan citizens. And as a result, Michigan citizens will not be protected from pollution
That's
and from
right.
other environmental harms.
So there's a real legal case here as well, because there are federal and state environmental laws that these agencies are created to fulfill, right? They have real missions. And so I think it will be short order for our new Attorney General, Dan Essel, to also start to, now that, okay, you're not going to have this executive order that gets rid of this unconstitutional, you're not going to be able to fulfill statutory mandates that say we have clean air and water, then we'll take you to court over that. And I think that will be a likely next step in Michigan if this isn't resolved at the legislative level. So there's this parallel, though, between the feds and the state.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you know, I want the courts to strike down Donald Trump's executive order because he doesn't actually have that power. There are things that matter. Here at the other end of the agencies and our own state governor, right, we want that to be able to move forward. And so there's always, as Don knows, another player and another move in any political chess match.
Oh my gosh, wow. Well, yeah, I mean, she's really reached out to Republicans.
Oh, yes.
And tried to find a
point.
way to work together.
Excellent.
And this is a setback from them, that
Agreed.
they are just saying, no, well, there's limits here, we're not going to do this, because of the corporate power that they want to maintain. Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, we have term limits, right,
Yeah.
in Michigan, which, you know, let's maybe not get into all of that, but these panels don't also, the revolving door is there. So there's no kind of limit on, you know, who you were before and what deals you made, and you can be appointed to one of these panels, right? So I think a lot of legislators, I think, well, once I'm term limited out, I'll just be on the panel for X, Y, or Z, and I'll make tons of money because all my buddies will tell me which way they need this particular rule to go. I mean, there's a real corruption implicit in these, right? But no, I think you're actually at the State of the State was, you know, it was a really great speech, and she began and ended that speech with a call for the commons, for unity, right? And not just like, you know, Trump's State of the Union that started with that and then went off back into partisan politics. She did really try to hold together the ideas of infrastructure and education and some areas of bipartisan support on those, and stress this idea of unity or a family. What, you know, what are we going to do together? So I think she is trying to really reach out and make that happen, and the tone got set from the top from her on that message, and then this is the first, you know, response.
Slap in the face. That's what it was. It was a slap in the face.
It was, who do you think you are? We're not going there.
And again, the whole issue of fixing the roads. Right?
Yes.
Funding education.
That's right.
Right.
You know, repairing the damaged environment, right? I mean, we have so many important needs
Yes.
that are, we need to do these things to protect the
Right.
citizens of Michigan,
Right.
right?
That's right.
To make their lives better, right? And those things cost money.
Yeah.
You
Well-
can't fix roads without money. You can't run an educational system without money. You can't regulate
That's right.
the environment or deal with the
That's
Flint
right.
water crisis and lead in the water without money.
That's right.
And so the Republicans keep saying, well, where are you going to get the money for all this?
Yeah.
Right? Well, you just gave all the money away with all the tax cuts that you've
Right.
given out to corporations
Exactly.
and businesses over the
Right.
years and to the wealthy. So yeah, there's no money left, right?
Right.
And now you don't want to raise taxes
Right.
on any of your constituents in order to provide us
Right.
with the necessary funds to do the important work that needs to be done.
Right.
And so unless the Republicans relent and allow for some revenue increases, we're not going to be able to fix the damn roads, as the governor says.
Right, right, right.
We're not going
Exactly.
to be able to fund education. We're
That's
not going
right.
to be able to clean up the environment.
Yeah.
And so people will continue to suffer.
That's
right. We're going to keep
Yep.
hitting potholes of one kind or another unless
That's right.
there's some change. And again, so we're coming back again to that ideological debate over what's the proper role of government.
That's right.
What is the proper role
Yes.
of government?
Yep.
Is
Yes.
government there to protect and serve the citizens of the state and to improve the quality of their lives? If
Right.
so, then yes, there have to be sufficient revenues to allow government to take on that role, right?
That's right.
And in such fundamental things as water. I mean, we're really in
Right.
trouble with the water and the PFAS and other kinds of
Exactly.
pollution in the water. That's a real serious
Yeah.
issue right there.
Well, one thing that Governor Whitmer mentioned over and over in her speech is the actual constitutional power that in the 10th Amendment. What can states do? What do they have power over, right? Health, safety, welfare.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back and listen to her speech, I always do these little fun count, like 5 or 6 times in what, a 35-minute speech, she went back to those words. And that's, right, I think, the vision of what is government for? It's for the health, safety, and welfare of people, not of corporations and not of legislators, right? Yeah.
And you know, what we've had ever since the Reagan era was this denigration of government, right?
Right.
I mean, it started with Ronald Reagan. Government's not the solution, government's the problem,
That's right.
And this has been a constant drumbeat. Taxes are too high, government is corrupt, government is
Yeah.
the problem, government can't do anything right. And, you know, so we just have had a constant drumbeat
Right.
of that. And of course, that was a very concerted political campaign
Right.
engaged in by the right wing of the in the country, and the Republican Party bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
And so what we've had is again this denigration of government, and
Right.
so things have fallen apart, right? I
Which
mean,
is a then self-reinforcing cycle, right? Because once you defund programs and you take away powers of the state, and then things start crumbling like infrastructure, and you say, well, look at what a terrible job they're doing, right?
Right.
And it's sort of right. It's a self-reinforcing. Well, what are they learning in those schools? Those loser teachers that we all are, right? And it just self-perpetuates itself, right? And so it takes a little twist of the intuition there to be like, well, no, there is an investment here that we're making rather than a divestment
Right,
in ourselves,
right,
right?
Right.
And one can do that within a capitalist society.
That's
I mean,
right.
this is what social democracy is all about. That's what the Scandinavian countries show.
Yeah.
There is another path here.
That's right.
And so again, this is why always the smear and the boogeyman of Soviet-style authoritarian socialism and communism is brought up as a way to defeat any of these very common sense, important efforts for government to improve the quality of life of the people. And it's a way to protect corporate profits
That's
and
right.
the economic and political interests of the powerful in the country.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that play out with the Green New Deal battle. We're seeing it play out in our own state with this battle over
Right.
the reorganization of the Environmental Quality Agency, the Eagle.
Eagle, huh?
And so this is an ongoing battle. And
Yeah.
again, I think that not enough people really understand some of the dimensions and distinctions that are being made here. All right. Well, we have just a couple of minutes left, but I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about a number of upcoming events in the community that might be of interest to our viewers. So let me sort of take them in terms of the dates that they're coming up. on February 19th, which is a Tuesday at 5 o'clock. There is a group that is organizing a demonstration and protest outside of Representative Fred Upton's office, focusing on the situation in Venezuela and the U.S. intervention in Venezuela. And so there's a call for no more U.S. intervention and to allow the Venezuelan people to make their own decisions. And so that's going to be, again, outside Fred Upton's office on 350 East Michigan Avenue, 5 o'clock on Tuesday, February 19th. That's one event that's coming up. Another event that same day, later in the evening at 7 o'clock, up at Western in the Bernhard Center, room 106, there's going to be an opportunity for discussion of peace and justice issues in Israel and Palestine. Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War is joining the College Democrats during their weekly meeting to discuss peace and justice issues in Israel and Palestine. So that again is also Tuesday, February 19th, the Bernhard Center, room 106, 7 o'clock. Thursday of that week, February 21st, there's a fairly new group in town called Kala Salon, and I don't know too much about them, unfortunately, but they also are going to be discussing peace for Israel and Palestine. This is on Thursday, the 21st, at 6:30, and they meet at the Central City Tap House here on the Kalamazoo Mall, right downstairs from where we are taping this program, as a matter of fact. And so, again, that's February 21st, another discussion of peace for Israel and Palestine. There's also going to be a panel from dusk to the dawn. A panel of Afghani women will be discussing women's progress and challenges in education, politics, and the arts after 2001 in Afghanistan. That's on Wednesday, February 26th at 1 o'clock. It's in the Bernhard Center, the President's Dining Room in the Bernhard Center. And so these are a number of events that are coming up in our community. Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War has been involved in helping to organize some of these. Those of you that are interested in Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War, that group meets on the second Monday of each month at the Presbyterian Church downtown, and those meetings start at 5 o'clock. If you'd like to become involved and help organize some of these kind of events, you're welcome to do so. Well, that's it for us today. Thanks to Denise Keele and Don Cooney, and we thank you for joining us. We invite you to come back for more discussion of critical issues and alternative views.